Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Entry Point Hunting Podcast, the only podcast where its hunting experts admit that they don't really know what they're talking about as hosts, but we bring on the experts to share the information with you. My name is Drew.
And my name is Justina. Today, I am excited to introduce you to our guest who hails from Kelowna, BC, in the beautiful Okanagan Valley and is well known for his bow hunting expertise and experience. Kevin Toye is an avid big game hunter with a passion for precision and conservation. He is also the creator of Focus Outdoors Canada and host of the Focus Hunting podcast. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Kevin. Kevin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a treat for me to have you on because I recently got a bow and discovered that I don't know anything about anything to do with bows, thanks to your knowledge and educating me on how to do all of the things, including drawing back my bow, which I still can't do without assistance.
It'll come. It's like anything. It takes practice. It takes work, and you stick with it, and it'll come.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe for those that don't necessarily know you or follow you yet, do you want to share a little bit about your hunting journey to date? How did you get into A, hunting, and B, bow hunting?
Well, I started like most people. Well, most people in my situation, we started with my dad. So I'm from Kelowna now, and I actually grew up in northern British Columbia, Prince Rupert. So small coastal town. So fishing, hunting, it's pretty present way of life up there. And my dad was him and my uncles were moose hunters. So we'd go, started out 8, 9 years old, started hunting with him and my uncles. They were mostly just truck hunters, so that was a different style of hunting that I was used to, or that I came accustomed to doing. It is what I love to do now. I moved to the Okanagan in, I think it was 2005. I moved to the Okanagan. I got into hunting down here, and my cousin had already lived down here for a while. He was originally from up north as well, but he was more of a backpack hunter and more of a bow hunter. So he kind of transitioned me into that sort of lifestyle and put a bow in my hand. And I hunted.
You had been strictly rifle up to that point.
Yeah, most people, you shoot a bow, you pick up a bow, and you do it as part of education in school and part of gym class. But I never really got into bow hunting seriously, and never really even started shooting like a compound bow until he put one in my hand. And it was about 2017 that I got into bow hunting seriously, but I wasn't really a bow hunter yet. I would shoot a bow once or twice in the summertime, and then as it got close to September 1st, which is our archery season here, I would, I'd hit it hard and shoot the bow every day. But still, once it got into rifle season, I pick up my rifle, and then kind of as I got a little better at hunting, I wanted more challenge. I'd go on like a 5-day hunt, but I would take my bow and I'd also take my rifle just in case. And then 3 days into a bow or a hunt, it starts getting tough. I'd always resort back to picking up my bow. And then in 2020, I didn't even pull the gun out. I just went strictly bow, and I've been just strictly bow hunting ever since. So
wow. I just want to circle back to one thing. Like, I don't know what school you went to, but archery was never a cool enough thing to make it into our PE classes. Really? I don't think I ever got that.
Yeah,
dodgeball and running.
Yeah.
Well, and that could just be. It could be just our gym teacher was into it, I think, right? So I think it all depends on the teacher if he's into it, and obviously if archery is one of those things that if you've never done it and you're not experienced, it's pretty hard to teach people. Like I have a hard time. Like we were talking when you were shooting. I mean, I said I'm not a good teacher for archery. Like I teach my kids, but my cousin, my mentor. Yeah, my mentor who taught me and he teaches my kids and my wife, and he was a lot better at it than I am, or at least from the way I look at it is he had well, I mean he still does. He's got a way better understanding of all the little knickknacks of archery that I don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as somebody who doesn't know anything, I feel like you taught me pretty well. I know the fundamentals of what I'm supposed to do. It's just actually executing those and practicing that is the work that gets put into it. So I'd give yourself a little pat on the back. You know, you do all right.
Yeah, well, archery is one of those things that I don't think there's one correct way of doing it.
No.
Like you can have the basics to do it, and there's certain fundamentals that you need to be a good archer, but everybody's different. So everybody is so different. I mean, everyone draws their bow back differently. Everyone's bodies are differently, different draw lengths. You know, that there's so many different variables in it that's one of the unique things about archery is that there's no perfect way to do it. And even like I tell people, I'm like, there's no perfect shot execution. Everyone's
Right.
different. It's just you have to be able to do. It's like a golf swing. It doesn't matter. You know, you just need to do it the exact same every time over and over, and it's consistency. And the only way to get that consistency is you just have to shoot arrows. You got to shoot them over and over and over and over and over, and that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So you kind of touch on that repetitive process. Do you have like a workout or a practice? Like what's your daily, not out actually hunting or anything like that, but when you're shooting arrows, what does that look like for you?
So I shoot my bow every day.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that. Not every day. If I'm out hunting, obviously I don't get a chance to shoot my bow every day. I just had knee surgery a month ago. I shot the day I had surgery. I didn't shoot the day after surgery, but I shot the next day. So I make a point, and it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter if I'm in my garage shooting 20 feet or if I'm out in my front yard shooting 70 yards. It doesn't matter. It's just I need for myself, and I just need that process, and it just helps me mentally, and it just helps me keep myself in check for everything. And it kind of goes like as the year progresses, my shooting will definitely change, and as we get closer to hunting season, I'll start tinkering with broadheads. But yeah, the process is very simple, very similar throughout the year. I got to shoot every day.
Mm-hmm. Within that process, like if you're shooting every day, do you have any sort of mental mantra that you're saying as you're going through each shot, or is it just so much ingrained into your body now that you don't think about it?
Yeah, like now I don't really do, but I know like early when I was shooting, like early on, I would have a process, and I would just like 11-step rule is kind of what my cousin taught me, you know, feet, grip, anchor, all that stuff, and just walk through that process. But that's different for everybody else too. Everybody else has a different process of doing, but I would make a point of following the execution that I built. And Justina, you're going to have a different one that works for you. And, you know, Drew, if you ever shoot, or if you do shoot, you're going to have one different one that works for you. And for me, it was that, but now it's just putting arrows down range. I don't, every time I shoot the bow, like every time I shoot, and I can tell right away if a shot's going to be bad or good.
Yeah, kind of like throwing a ball or a frisbee or something. You know, as soon as you let go, if it's going where you want it to.
Before the arrow even hits the target, I can tell if it was a good shot or bad shot.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
like
so
I said,
it's just muscle memory for you.
Yeah.
Now.
A lot of those times that, you know, I'd shoot 200 to 500 arrows every day. And I mean, still, like some days I'll go out into the front yard and I'll shoot 70 yards and I'll shoot over 200 arrows easily in a day. And I've spent the better part of 10, 12 hours a day shooting my bow.
Wow.
So, but like I said, it's just, you know, I just fell in love with archery, and the more I did it and the more I do it, the more I want to do it. And it's one of those things that, I mean, if you're going to be a bow hunter, and that's the reason I do it is bow hunting. I feel that you owe it to that animal. You have to be able to put your time in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that 10,000 hour rule, or maybe in this case 10,000 arrows or something that makes you an expert and confident enough to be able to know that at whatever yardage that you have honed in your skill, that it's going to be a clean and ethical shot. And I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, and again too, I mean, it doesn't matter how many times, you know, it's different, and every hunt's different, every animal's different. So there's so many different variables, and you know, there's so many things that can go wrong when you're hunting that, you know, you need a little more. I mean, you owe a little more to the animal than just, you know, picking up your bow 5 days before, which is what I used to do. 5 days a
Yeah.
week before, I'd pick up my bow and I'd just put arrows at a target and be like, okay, good enough. But
I feel like that's what a lot of people do, whether it's rifles or bow
Reshot.
hunting. Some people shoot their rifle like once a year at the start of the season. Yep, still good. And then some people shoot their bow once a year at the start of the season. Oh, yep, still put it on
yeah,
the target.
yeah,
And that's it. Which to me, I mean, I couldn't, just because I know for myself from nerves alone. And I kind of put myself in those scenarios by having other people around, so that at least somebody's watching me, and it makes me more nervous. And I think, okay, this is the same type of adrenaline I'm going to have if suddenly I see an animal that's shootable. So putting yourself and training yourself to be in like an adrenaline induced state and then be shooting is totally different than one practice shot to make sure your machinery is still aligned.
yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, the only way you can actually practice for those situations is get out and put yourself in front of an animal, and at full draw.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different than having an animal in your crosshairs.
Totally.
Both of those are fairly foreign concepts for Justina and I, but
Yeah. I have looked at a few animals through the crosshairs of my gun, but not in a position to pull a trigger on them. So
Yeah, it just takes time. It's tricky. I mean, it's just days in the bush, and I mean, I might cut a lot of tags in a year, but I also spend a lot of time in the bush a year. So I mean, I'm well over 100 days a year hunting. So yeah, it just takes time.
Yeah.
For you're talking about kind of getting out and shooting every day, and it sounds like it's more of the act of just getting shots out. Is there a distance that someone should be kind of regularly practicing, or changing distances, or anything like that?
I don't think it matters like too much. I mean, if you were gonna shoot, obviously the further you shoot, the more accurate you're gonna become. It's like anything, right? But if you don't have, like I was telling Justina, I'm like, put a target in your living room and just shoot at it. That's all it is, right? If you're just getting into bow hunting, or it doesn't matter if you've been bow hunting for a year, or even for myself, like I said, in the wintertime, or when I had my knee surgery, I couldn't get into the front yard, but I was still walking into my garage and I was shooting. That doesn't matter, 10 feet. It's just that process. It's just getting it, like Christina said, or Justina said, sorry, it's that getting used to that muscle memory. It's drawing back, remembering your steps. And like I said at the beginning, when I first started shooting a bow, I would have to sit there and be like, hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, walk myself through the process. Now it's just, it's like putting on my shoes, or, putting on a hat. It's just second nature to me now. And what you're saying, one thing is that if you shoot enough arrows, all those variables, they become less of an impact when you're hunting. So like if you're shooting, if you were shooting, 200, 100 arrows every day, the situations that you're going to get into when you're hunting, they're less impactful, because you're so used, your body has become so used to that motion that it doesn't matter if it's on a hill, or if it's you've got one foot up in front of the other, or you're on your knees. Your body has become so used to getting that motion and that repetition that it just, like, again, it comes down to second nature. And that's all it really is. It's just muscle memory.
Yeah, it takes away one more variable for you to
Yeah.
consider, and you can focus more on the animal that you're trying to target. Yeah. You and I chatted the other day a little bit about bow hunting versus rifle hunting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the advantages of being a bow hunter, or maybe not advantages, but just the differences that makes bow hunting something that you do exclusively now instead of rifle hunting as well. Like, why bow hunt?
Why bow hunting? Well, the thing about bow hunting is that the reason I got into bow hunting, and the reason I just bow hunting now, is the discipline of it. Like, so rifle hunting is something I can't shoot a rifle every day. I mean, I could, but realistically, I got to go to work every day. I work, I got 3 kids at home. I got duties at home. It's just
Bullets are
something that
expensive.
yeah, they're expensive. And it's just realistically something that I can't drive to the range. I just, I mean, like I said, you could do it, but realistically, not everybody has time to do it. But like bow hunting is a discipline that I can do every day. So like 3 things I do every day to bow hunt is I work out every day, I ride the bike or I run every day, and I shoot my bow every day. It doesn't matter. Those are the three things, my three disciplines that I have to do every day for bow hunting. And that's what draws, that's to me, that's the sexiness of it, is that it creates that discipline that to be, I can be a better bow hunter every single day if I follow these three things every day. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's obviously a differential in bow hunting from rifle hunting, in the sense that in order to be a successful bow hunter, you do have to be able to get closer to animals than necessarily what a rifle will let you do. So, two questions to that that I have is, what's your favorite animal to bow hunt? And also, what's the skill set of getting closer to them without them taking off?
Well, my favorite animal to hunt with a rifle or with a bow, it didn't matter. It is the mule deer. If you could say you could hunt one animal for the rest of your life, it would be a mule deer, hands down
Why?
for me. Like I said, when I grew up, we had black-tailed deer, which are similar to the mule deer, but they're a little different. And we had moose, and I remember the first time I seen a mule deer, it was a city buck, and like we all know, especially around here in Kelowna, the city bucks they're pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing it for the first time, and I just instantly fell in love with it. And then I was like, man, I'd love to have one of those.
Yeah.
And then I realized how hard it was to actually obtain that goal of getting one of those. It is something else. Like, to me, over 200-inch mule deer with a bow is the hardest thing in the hunting space to achieve. I've shot sheep, I've shot goats, I've shot moose, elk, everything. But to get that world class, that mature mule deer buck with a bow is by far, to me, it's the hardest.
Yeah, that would be incredible. Have you done it?
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't gotten over 200-inch with my bow yet. I have shot over 200-inch mule deer, but they're with a rifle. So one of the thing about hunting mule deer is, if you're going to hunt mule deer and you're going to be successful, you pretty much have to be willing to sacrifice all the other animals you're going to hunt throughout the fall just to chase the mule deer. You got to start early. Your scouting has to start early. And
they're elusive, man. I didn't really realize it. For some reason in my mind, I guess just from what I had heard or been told through friends or whatever, everyone said, oh, whitetail are super hard to find because they're so skittish, they'll just take off. And I saw mule deer bucks in my first year of hunting. And then last year, which was my second year, I didn't see any other than the city deer, which don't count.
Well, and I think that's a misconception a lot of people have. You're like, oh, the mule deer, they're around everywhere. And you see big bucks, but you see them in town. They've just, they were born in town. They've never left. They're generational bucks that have grown up in town. So they never leave and they're comfortable with it. But we can't hunt those bucks in town.
And they never leave.
And they never leave. Exactly. And so to be able to find that class of buck in the wilderness when you can hunt them, it's totally different. Like, you can't pattern them like whitetail. Like whitetail, if you're driving through the bush and you see an area and you be like, oh, there's whitetail in there for sure. You put a couple trail cameras up there and guaranteed there's going to be bucks in there. They're easy to pattern and you can find their route every day. And as long as they don't get bumped off that route, they're going to be back there every day. With the mule deer, I mean, the mule deer do have a migratory pattern where you can pattern, but you're not going to be able to put them in a spot every day where you're going to be able to hunt them. Unfortunately,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, from experience.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think in my mind I have them reversed. Like I just thought mule deer were the run of the mill, just hanging around, doing whatever all the time, same thing. And that whitetail were like the hiding in the bush ones. So in my brain, that's reversed for some reason.
Yeah, and you do see a lot of mule deer. Like, you're gonna see those younger, you'll see those fork bucks out. You'll see the does out. The does don't really care, right? The does, they do their own thing. But the big bucks, once they get to be 4 years old, they get a little more skittish, and they get to 5 years old, they're really skittish. So you're gonna get those bucks, but you're gonna get them in the high alpine, and they all seem to like, the same. They're not goats. They don't like it where the goats live, but they like it steep. They don't like it super rocky. But there's certain things that the mule deer need. Obviously, they need water, they need food, they need protection. So there's a lot of things that they need. But unfortunately, where those big bucks like to live, it's pretty nasty in a lot of those places, and they like the thick cover too. And BC, we have a lot of thick cover. We don't have those nice open rolling hills that Montana and Wyoming has. And
yeah, or nice little cut cornfields and bean
Yeah.
fields and whatever. I listen to a lot of podcasts out of the States, and I just skip the ones where they're talking about hunting on the edge of a field or something, because we just don't have that here, other than maybe wineries in the Okanagan, but you can't really hunt those because they're in city limits.
Yeah, again, and it goes back to those you might as well classify those as city deer, and we can't hunt those. I mean, those deer do exist, but unfortunately we don't get an opportunity to hunt them in BC anyway. I mean, Alberta's different, it's different province to province, but for us in BC here, just to get those big bucks. Now they do move down, they get into second living, and then when the rut's on, obviously, if they're chasing does, you're going to find them. That's the best time to see those big bucks, is when they're chasing does. If they've hooked up, if they've already located and they're already matched up with some does, they're going to be harder to, because they're going to be forcing those does and bending down, and they already have control of them. But the best time I find to hunt deer is early in September, when they're moving down to their second living, and when they're chasing the does. You'll see the most action.
Can you so second living? Can you kind of expand on it a bit? I hadn't heard that term before.
So like secondary living. So like the mule deer, so they'll be in the winter range where they are now, and then as the snow melts, they're going to follow what's called the green wave, right? And they're going to follow that where the vegetation is, and they're going to go up into the high alpine. The bucks are going to go up into the high upon the big bucks anyway, because there's protection up there, like I said, right? They there's no humans up there, and there's no bears up there. The bears are going to be down lower. I mean, there's obviously wolves. There's wolves everywhere. I mean, but it is what it is, right? And then that's just, and it's cooler up there as well too. And so that's where they spend most of their time. And now as the temperatures start to fall and the snow level starts to push, it pushes the deer down into their secondary living. And then, so that's, end of August, early September, to the middle of September, they'll start moving down to secondary living. And they're doing that also because they know as the temperature changes that they're going to have to come down further to meet up with the does, because once the rut's on, they're only going to have one thing on their mind, and that's breeding.
I always had this illusion, and it's because everyone talks about the rut, like deer just walk out into the middle of the road like dummies and stand there and wait for you to come along as a hunter. So every time the rut's coming, I'm like, all right, I haven't seen a deer, but the rut's here. I'm gonna walk out into the woods, and there's gonna be 80 bucks right there just waiting for me. And last year during the rut, I don't think I saw I barely saw does, let alone saw bucks. So this rut thing, not my friend yet.
Well, and like I said, I've had more success hunting mule deer before the rut, like the week before the rut, when the does go into estrus and they put out a scent, and then the bucks start picking up that scent before they hook up with their mate. They're going to be running around like crazy. They're going to be the most active, I find, and that's when you're going to have the best chance to get a world class or bigger mule deer.
Yeah,
is right before that. Once they get into the rut, they go back into their old habits, and they're still sketchy. I mean, bucks, doesn't matter if it's a whitetail, doesn't matter if it's a big elk, doesn't matter if it's whatever it is. It's that big for a reason. It's not stupid, and the older they get, the more cagey they get.
Is the rut determined? Does it shift by weather, or is it kind of calendar, or how does that end up?
Daylight.
Yeah.
Light. The amount of light in that day. That triggers something in the does that they know, and all the does just all of a sudden, they just don't all of a sudden bang go into estrus at once, right? They all fall into estrus at certain times and different times. But the bucks, they're going to mate. They're going to try to mate with more than one doe if they're lucky.
Yeah, I made the mistake last year. I stumbled upon some guy's little tree stand thing that he had made, and I had never seen, because I have never used like estrus scent stuff, and I just saw this little like white felty looking thing on the ground. I was like, oh, this guy accidentally dropped some garbage or whatever, and I picked it up and I put it in my bino case. And as I was walking, I was like, wow, that guy also like dumped a bottle of estrus in this spot. And as I'm walking further away, I'm like, oh man, maybe it was in the air and it's just all. And then I realized what a dummy. I touched the estrus thing with my glove, put it in my bino case, and I'm just like wafting into my face while I'm walking. It was disgusting. Took a long time to try and get that out of there.
Did you get it out? I was gonna say I don't know if you
I
can get that stuff out. Some of it's pretty
my
potent.
bino case has like a very mild scent of estrus to it, but my gloves I was able to actually wash out.
Well, you didn't have any bucks chasing you, eh?
No, I thought about that. I was like, man, either this guy is in his tree stand watching me and just laughing, or like I'm gonna get attacked by some animal on my way back to my car.
It'd be nice if that was the latter of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you stand hunt, or are you like spot and stock, or what's your preferred and most successful?
For what type of animal? What are we talking?
Let's stick on mule deer. I think we could never have enough time to go into all of them.
Yeah, I mean mule deer. I'm purely spot and stock. So my tactics for mule deer is I'll scout, and if I know, well, most of the areas I hunt mule deer now, I know that there's mule deer, and now I don't spend as much time as I used to, which is present in the quality of bucks I've taken the last couple of years. They're just not as good as they were in the past when I had more time. Well, when I dedicated more time into the scouting. So my tactics are I just get high as I can, and I'll glass all day. And I find the best time is mid-morning. You'll see the most activity from the bucks in mid-morning and right before dark. So what I find too with the mule deer is they'll be feeding and then they'll lay down for a little bit, but they're not really comfortable. Where they get the most comfortable is they'll get up again and they'll go into a shady spot, and then they'll hunker down and they'll stay in that spot for pretty much most of the day while the sun is hot, beating down. And then as the sun rolls around and they get some shade, they get up again. But that's where I find most of the best time to target and to spot mule deer is in those two times. And then once I see him, it all depends when I see him. If I see him in the midday, then basically once I see him move into that second bed, I'll pretty much come up with a plan to get into a position where he's going to walk out for the evening. Yeah. And then that's when I make my, that's where I'll get a kill shot.
So what you're saying is I don't have to wake up before the crack of dawn. I can just wait till mid-morning.
No, but you want to get in there, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I've hunted whitetails and I've hunted, other animals, and you get in there early. They can see in the dark and we can't. So, I mean, I remember chasing, I was after this had to be about a 185 inch whitetail. And I had him on my trail camera and I had a blind set up there, and I was going there every day and I was just missing him on the days that I couldn't go in there. He'd happen to be in there. And then one morning I walked in there in the dark and I spooked a deer because he was puffing at me, and I never seen that buck again on my trail cameras. And I was pretty convinced that was the buck I had been chasing all year.
Man.
If I, and that's kind of my rule now, is I don't ever walk into my blind in the dark, just because, and I've done it before. I've bumped deer going into my blind, and you also see so many tracks walking in and out, and you never know what you're going to see. So I'm always ready when I walk into my blind now. Learn my lesson the hard way. But we all got to go through that.
Yeah. So are you, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts from the States, like I said, and they talk a ton about using tree stands. Is that even a thing in BC, or is it just not something that you do?
No, a lot of guys do. I don't use them. I mean, I have used them mostly for whitetail. I think it's going to be the most effective for whitetail. Okay. The guy, like if you're in Alberta, people in Alberta, they get to bait bears. So if you're baiting bears, tree stands are a great option. Yeah. But myself, I use the blind, and most of the time what I'll do is if I'm in an area where I've seen a lot of activity, or if sometimes you'll find an area where there's a good brush underneath, and the deer, they go through and they dig that up and they come back and they feed at it every day. So if you can find one of those and know they're going to be there, you can just set up. I just make little temporaries. I'll break some twigs off and I'll set them up and I'll just duck down and hide behind that. But most of the time I use a blind for like whitetail, but for mule deer, never. Elk, never. So yeah, elk and mule deer are always just spot and stalk. And then if you're goat hunting, it's tree stands. Yeah. Not doing you a lot of good. And if you figure out a way to shoot a goat out of a tree stand, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah. Probably run a TV show or something. Yeah. Tree stand goats. You also talked about being able to watch a mule deer get up and go to its secondary bedding spot in a day. So are you glassing really far ranges to be able to find these guys and then waiting for them to move before you actually move in?
Well, so about maybe 500 yards would be the max. Anywhere I can get my binoculars. So if I've already know, if I like, we're talking, if I already know the mule deer's in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So like I'll sit up on a ridge and I'll watch them, and then they'll be up in the morning, they'll be feeding, they'll be doing their thing. They might lay down for a bit, then they'll get up again, they'll move around, they'll get to a better shady spot, and they'll sit down in that shady spot all day. They won't move. They'll just lay there all day, I find. And I call that their secondary bedding, just because they're not going to leave there. And so once I've watched that deer, and I'll watch that deer from 8 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mm.
And then once I get it into a position where the thermals are going to do what I know they're going to do, I feel comfortable. I can get into a position where he's going to get up, where I think he's going to get up, and he's going to move back into, or move back out when the sun goes down a little bit.
Mm.
But it
And so
doesn't always work. Like you're it's a guessing game, and they're deer, and they don't always do what you want them to do. So
yeah, but to find them, are you using the e-scouting aspect to say, okay, I think there's going to be deer here, or are you just spot and stalking until you see something and then hunkering down?
Well,
for
that comes
day?
down. Okay, so that comes down to your scouting. So like
Yeah.
for scouting for deer. So when I'm black bear hunting this spring, I'll be looking for deer sign, right? I'll be looking for deer because then the areas where I'm going to be hunting spring bear are the same areas that the bear are going to be looking for the same thing that the mule deer are looking for. They're going to be looking for the green grass. They're going to be looking for vegetation that's not covered in snow. And then the mule deer, they're going to be working that, as the snow melts all the way up to the alpine, and we call it the green wave. They'll be following that up into the high alpine. So I'll be scouting for big deer that I find when I'm black bear hunting. And now I know a general area where those black bear. I don't do any e-scouting for mule deer. So, and then once I know that they're in there and it gets a little closer to the season, I'll go back into that area and I'll just start glassing. I'll start glassing. I'll start walking around. I'll walk the creek beds, look for, you look for sign, look for rubs too. I mean, once they start getting itchy, they're going to rub all that velvet off their head. And and then once you know what you're looking for, it's not hard. If there's going to be mule deer in that area, you're going to be able to find them and you're going to be able to locate them a lot faster. But again, that's site specific. I've gone into a lot of areas where I thought, man, there's got to be good mule deer in here. And I've hunted that area for, 7 days, a week, 2 weeks, never seen one mule deer.
Wow. Now, okay. In saying that, sorry, Drew, I'm drilling in on this one. Are you hunting those areas because you've seen sign at least, or you're like, this is mule deer habitat, they should be here, but then the sign just doesn't?
So now I'm only going to hunt an area. Like if I've scouted it and I've seen deer in there, that's the area I'm going to hunt. I'm not going to waste my time anymore hunting in an area where I don't see the deer. I'm just not going to. Not to say that there's not going to be deer in there. I just might not have seen them. And as the season progresses, I mean, those big bucks are weird. Some big bucks, they only move around at night. They just don't move around in the day. They get up and they stay in the thick trees. And if they're in the thick trees, you're never going to see them. The only way you got to glass for those pockets. And you basically just got to get a glimpse. And your glassing comes down to a lot of it too. And the more you glass, the better you get. And like for the longest time, I never glassed with the tripod, and that I didn't see a lot of deer just because I wasn't glassing with the tripod. I mean, binoculars on a tripod are a huge advantage. You could be looking at a tree and there could be a mule deer in a bush, and if you don't have your binoculars on a tripod, you'll never see the antlers sticking out of that bush.
Yeah, so you would recommend that then, investing in a tripod at least?
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. I always have my tripod, even if I'm not taking my spotting scope, which a lot of the times too, I'll take a lower powered spotting scope and I'll just glass with my spotting scope as well. It all depends the area I'm hunting.
Now, are you looking up, like you're getting to high ground? Are you looking across valleys at other mountainsides, or like how far out are you?
Yeah, like I'm gonna go to the place that has the best vantage point. Yeah, I'm not gonna go to a point where I can't see anything, or go to a place where I just can't see anything, or I only can see one little pocket, and hope that there's gonna be a deer walk through that little pocket. Yeah, I'm going to a place that has the best the best and the most, the best place to see where I'm going to, or spot where I'm going to see deer. And now, having said that, if there's a deer, if I know for a fact there's a deer in an area that doesn't have a great vantage point, I'll work that area for that deer if I know he's in there for sure. Because if there's, especially in the early season, if there's a reason up in the high alpine, if there's a reason those deer, like if that deer's in there, there's a reason he's in there, right? Because it has everything he needs. He needs protection, he needs water, he needs food, right? Until the rut comes on, he doesn't need anything else. So he's going to be in that area as long as he's not spooked out or scared out by wolves or humans. There's no reason for him to leave. So he's going to be in there. So if I find an area, if I know there's a deer in there, a good deer that I want to, a target buck, I'll stick to that area. But other than that, I'm finding areas where I have the best chance that, it's a percentage game. The more area you see, the better chance you have of finding a buck.
I can't wait until I have the confidence and knowledge level to be like, I know for sure that there's a buck in there and I'm just going to wait him out. But I guess the key in that is that if if you're not a spring bear hunter and able to be scouting on the ground, physically sourcing out where these deer are, then e-scouting for those areas that you just described that have food, water, and shelter are going to be the keys to being able to actually
I think
she timed out there.
We might have a little bit of technical difficulty. So I guess
okay.
Interrupt now, but so we were out on a big trip and we were up in the high alpine and had a bunch of does, and it was fairly early season, kind of mid-September. If you're early mid-September and you're seeing a pack of does, could you expect that you would see bucks around there as well, or are they pretty separate until later in the season?
Well, there'll be bucks there. Like what kind of, but it all depends on what kind of buck you're looking for. If you're looking for a big, 180, 190, 200 inch buck, he's most likely not going to be in there that early. No, not unless you're getting close to something that if he's got protection's huge. If he's got food, if he's got water, like the bucks that live around town, if there's a reason for him to be in there like that, where he was born in there, he's been in there his whole life, he's never left, and he's just matured into a big buck, then you'll find it. But those chances are, some guys who have private property or they have access to private property, they're lucky enough to have opportunities like that. Myself, I don't. So again, it all comes down to scouting. And the thing is, if you don't spring bear hunt, put on some hiking boots. You need to get in shape anyway, because if you want to get these big bucks, they're going to be in a place where it's not going to be easy to get into, because they don't like being disturbed. They got, like I said, they got that big for a reason. It's because they're not dumb, and they stayed away from any predator out there. They stayed away from. So put on a pair of hiking boots, grab your bear spray and just go for a hike. Take the family with you, take the kids. I do that all the time too. I'll drag all three of my kids up there with me, and we'll go scouting, and we'll look for rubs, and you see a lot of other things too. You see elk, you see a lot of cool, interesting stuff.
Are you is there a region for mule deer? Are they fairly, like, if I go out in August and I up in the high alpine and I find an area that's got good mule deer, are, aside from moving down as the snow comes and as the season changes, are they going to be sort of in that area, or are they migrate?
Yeah. Okay. They'll be in there. Like I said, if I find good deer in an area like early, even if I find them in June, I'm going to go back to that area. I'll probably go back if I find a really good buck. I'll go back to that area in July. I'll go back to him in August, and I'll just sit there and try to find out where he's been. Most of the time, they don't go far. And just the nice thing is too, you get a layout for the land, and that's a big thing too. So like I said earlier, if I see a buck, he's moved into secondary living, and now the thermals have changed, so I'm comfortable where I can move, where I'm not going to get blown out. I am already going to have an idea of what the landscape's can be like. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to handcuff myself by going into a place where I'm going to get cliffed out, and then I got to spend an hour walking all the way back around, because then I'm going to have blown my opportunity. So I like to get into areas to it. Again, though, like if this is all part of hunting big mule deer, big class mule deer, you have to be willing to put the time in. Like I said, over the last couple of years, I just haven't put the time in that's required to get the big mule deer buck, and it's shown on class of animal I've taken. I've taken mule deer every year, but they just haven't been the big bucks, that I love to hunt.
To touch in on gear and hunting and bow hunting a little bit, you and I had these conversations when I was trying to figure out what bow to buy. But if there's, rookie hunters that are listening and watching to this, what are the key, or what would you think are the key elements that somebody should consider when they are choosing a bow? Other than obviously pick a good axle, the axle that fits your draw length.
The best thing to do, I would say, is if you don't know anybody, if you don't know anyone personally, the best thing is just go down, find an archery shop and go down there and talk to them. Don't order a bow online, because there's a 99% chance that the bow that you're going to order it's not going to be right for you. So, it's like trying to pair of shoes on and you don't know your shoe size, basically. So the best thing to do is go down to your archery shop, your local archery shop. If you got to drive, if you want to get into bow hunting, that's just something you have to do. It's tough in Canada. We don't have a lot of archery shops. It's definitely not as present as it is down in the States. On my podcast, we talk archery every show. We have archery specific guys, and that's kind of our gig. And the guy, what they have access to down the States is just, it blows your mind. But for me, that would be the biggest one, is either get in touch of somebody who's an experienced archer, or go down and talk to your bow shop, talk to a pro down there.
Yeah.
Do I got lucky and bought a bow off of a friend, and that was my first bow. And he was like, I got this bow for cheap, and they sold it to me. And then it became a tradition of our group of friends. We kept kind of moving it down the line to each other. But do you recommend people, a lot of things, it's buy nice or buy twice? Do you get in and get something that's cost effective and see if you like it? Or do you just is there a budget that makes sense?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just finding the bow that's right for you. And now it all depends on your draw length. Obviously, you don't want a perfect triangle. So if you're a 29-inch bow, you want, a 30-inch axle bow.
Yeah.
So it all depends. Again, draw weight's big. You don't want to be buying a 70-pound bow if you've never drawn a bow back before, because you're not going to be able to pull it back.
Or in my case, buying like a 50-pound bow and not being able to even pull it at 30.
Yeah, well, it's not easy. You know what I mean? It's not. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to draw that bow back, and you got to do it over and over. And we had you shooting when we went out, and I was assisting you a little bit, but it's not easy to do. And again, it just takes practice. Like I said, just every day, do a couple push-ups. Just try to pull it back in the morning, put it down, pull it, but you'll get it. And once you get it once, and it's like anything, you'll be able to do it, and then just do it twice and 3 times, and then before you know it, you pull it back like nothing, and then then you gotta tighten those cams or those limbs down. Yeah.
Go ahead, Drew.
I know that Justina was the one that kind of first brought this up when she was talking about first meeting you, but finger release and thumb release, or maybe if you could just start, someone listening to this, they've never shot a bow before. It's maybe gym class with a finger.
Yeah. Well, that's how and my kids, they started shooting the bow young, and the way I taught them was fingers. They started them out even on compound bow. They shot a compound bow with fingers. They just got used to the process. The big thing is pulling the bow back and getting used to that string on the nose. A lot of people think once that string is on your face, it's going to pull your nose off, and everybody goes through that fear. And you just got to get comfortable with the process, right? And then like my son, he shoots a wrist strap release right now, right? So he shoots a double caliper finger release. When he gets older, I'm sure he'll go into a thumb release. If he doesn't, there's nothing wrong at all with shooting, a wrist strap release. It's totally fine. There's better, you get into single caliper, double caliper for the releases, but that's getting pretty technical. And it all depends on what kind of archery he's going to do. If he's just going to bow hunt, then, maybe he'll want to stick with a wrist strap. Maybe he'll go to a thumb, or, some guys, I know guys that hunt with a back tension release, which is, I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but, they do it.
What's a back tension release?
So a back tension release works on tension. Is you draw back with it, and then it works on tension of your pull. You're not pulling a trigger at all. There's no trigger involved in it. It's purely tension. So the heart, when you get to full draw and you pull back a little bit more, it releases.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That,
And so to
yeah.
draw back now, imagine sitting there, you're at full draw, and all it takes is just moving your hand a little bit more tension, and that arrow is going to release. Now you have to draw back with it. So, I mean, I have a
Jeez.
back tension release. I like to shoot my back tension release once a year. So, like, when I go through my process at the beginning of the year, I kind of like get back to my fundamentals. I'll use my back tension release just to get me, just to get the proper range, the proper motion, because to shoot a back tension release, it forces you to have that proper motion. It's not, you don't want to punch the trigger. You don't want to jam it with your thumb. It's just squeezing your shoulder blades together and just nice, constantly smooth motion. And then it releases the arrow. It's just like squeezing a trigger on a rifle. You're not punching the trigger. It's just, you're squeezing the trigger. And essentially you're doing the same thing with a bow, and the back tension release is a nice, it assists you in learning that and reteaching you every year, which is what I do. I go back to shooting it every year.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think in one of our conversations about it, when I was trying to figure out what was going to work for me, you had mentioned at some point that the precision of a thumb release is, this might be my own words, but unmatched to, say, a finger release or like a back tension release. Thumb release is arguably more accurate.
Yeah. Like I prefer the thumb release. I find the thumb release is just, there's a less chance of you, and just your whole natural position of your hand on your face for your anchor point. It's a lot easier, and you're essentially like, the back tension release, like a back tension release is like the purest form of your release. It's just created by tension, right? It's you squeezing your shoulder blades together, and you have to have that perfect draw cycle to let that arrow go. And it's very similar. You can simulate the exact same thing. So when I shoot my thumb release, I'm shooting it the exact same way I shoot my back tension release. There's no difference. I'm shooting exact way difference. I just keep it held in my hand. So when I turn my hand and squeeze my shoulder blades together, the trigger is touched with my thumb. And I think when you and I were shooting, Justina, I showed you that technique of just, but again, it comes down to first learning the fundamentals. Like when my kids shoot, I don't, they still, well, Wyatt, my oldest, doesn't, but my other two, they still grip the riser, because there's so many variables to shooting a bow that if you try to worry about all these little tiny things at the beginning, you're going to get overwhelmed and you're not going to shoot your bow. You have to just focus on one thing at a time. And it goes down to that process of learning the steps. So like at the beginning, I said I had 11 steps, but at the very beginning, I was only worried about the first 3, right? And then you add number 4 in. Yeah. Then you shoot another 10,000 arrows, and then you worry about number 5 and another 10,000 arrows, 6, 7, and then you shoot 100,000, 200,000 arrows, and all of a sudden, all that's just second nature to you. Like I said, it's like putting your hat on it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that second nature part at some point.
The 11 steps, do you know them offhand, or?
I don't anymore. I could tell you, it's like your footing is big, right? Your footing, you can't have if you're a right-handed shooter, you can't have your left foot too far in front of the other, or else it's going to force you to be in a position where the string's going to hit your hand. So number 1 was always my feet. I keep my feet in the position. Anchor or grip, how I grip the bow. Knock, so how I knock the arrow onto the string. I wanted to hear that actual click to make sure it's on, because I've done that before too, and the arrow wasn't knocked on properly, and I go to draw my bow back and the arrow flies off. Yeah. So knock, and then set, which is you put your bow up, face your bow. You want your arrow always should be facing down range. You don't want to be lifting up in the sky, because if you're drawing back and you actually hit the trigger, your arrow is going to go flying and hit a building, or worst case scenario, hit somebody. So set, and then it was cycle, so you can get your elbow up. And again, when you're drawing your bow back, you want your elbow nice and parallel with your shoulder. You don't want it too high, or else it's gonna, you're gonna have bad rotator cuff damage. And then it was draw back, anchor. Your anchor point is where it sits on your face. Lip, nose. You want that triangle on your lip and your nose. You want the string should be on the corner of your lip and touching the tip of your nose. And then it was peep sight. So you make sure your peep is lined up with your sight housing, which is where your pins are, is perfectly centered with your peep sight. And then it was breath, grip again, and then release. So there's a lot of steps to it, but again, like those are all the steps that have to go through, that are going through when you're doing a proper shot execution.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that was my proper procedure when I did it. Like I said, I haven't actually sat there and said 1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't know. That seemed pretty accurate to me. I'm like, okay, well, you just told me all the things I had to do, and that's pretty much the order of all the stuff. I have a question for you. That's a very technical question that I was arguing with a friend about the other day. So when you are going to actually make that draw, the question is and I know what you told me, but I wonder if there's a logic that you can explain behind it, that your front elbow is not fully extended when you're going to draw. You're pushing and pulling at the same time.
Yeah, you don't want this arm hyperextended at all. It shouldn't be extended past the point where your forearm's exposed. If it is, your draw length's too long.
Mm-hmm.
It should be it should be bent in a slightly bent position and it all comes down to your grip too. If you're gripping your bow properly, your elbow will be in a position where it's not exposed. Your forearm won't get hit by that string, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're grabbing your riser, your grip of your bow, like you're holding a broom, it's going to hold your forearm. There's two bad things about that. That's going to induce hand torque, which is the worst. Like hand torque is the worst thing you can have when you're shooting a bow. If you're going to shoot a bow accurately, you need to solve hand torque first.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be. I always tell people, I'm like, if you have any hand torque issues, solve that first. That's the biggest thing. And there,
what's hand torque?
Hand torque is as you let go of a bow, the kinetic energy is going off the string through the arrow, and now it's the wave of, if you've ever watched a bow go in slow motion, the speed of what's actually happening to a bow and to a bow's riser, it's pretty violent. Now that bow is shaking, it's moving, your riser shaking, moving. Now if you're holding that bow, if you're holding the bow like this with a grip, it's hard to explain. I'm trying to explain it the best I can so listeners will understand. But if you're holding a bow with your hand like this, and you let go of that arrow, if you naturally grab your riser, you move your hand, that's gonna make your string go in a different angle as soon as you let go of it, right? So it's essentially, it's not shooting straight now because you've torqued your riser a little bit. Now it's shooting. It has a negative force of, like, there's no straight line anymore.
Yeah. So basically, if you're gripping in any way, shape, or form, you're gonna offset either left or right of where your arrow's going.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're shooting your bow, you want it, so basically there's a line. You can see the line in your hand, and it goes from the center of your palm up to your index finger, between your thumb. There's actually a line there. Now you want that on the outside of your riser. And when you're putting pressure on your bow, so like I'll grip my bow, I'll put my arrow in, I'll click on my D-loop, I'll set my grip, and now I hold a little bit of pressure where that bow is not going to fall. Now I have pressure here. I don't have to worry about the bow falling anymore, but I already have that. So now basically the bow, I'm pushing the riser with my bow.
Yeah.
I'm not holding it at all. I'm just pushing it. So now there's nothing that's going to induce any torque in that riser at all. Nothing. Right. The arrow is going to be gone. The arrow is going to have left the rest before the bow falls out of my hand, and I'll still catch the bow. I can catch it after, but all the arrow has gone through the bow, off the string, through the rest. It's already sent down range.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's going to induce any negative twists or anything between the two axles, which is driving your arrow. So if you think of a straight line, right, and then you basically have a point at the front that holds your arrow. Now, if you have you go 2 feet back and you have another point, if you were to turn that back point a little tiny bit, the front of your arrow is going to be turned a lot, right? So that's going to have a negative impact of where your arrow is going to end up downrange.
Yeah,
so that's
totally.
So if you twist your riser at all, the front of your bow is going to move a little bit, and the back is going to stay in the same spot. It's in the anchor, is the same spot, right?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense, I don't know.
Yeah, it does.
It's easier to show than to explain.
Well, and that's, I think, Justina and I talked about this beforehand. you're not listening or watching this podcast to learn how to shoot. This is there's YouTube videos, there's all these resources, and but those thought processes and understanding why you do things, I think, is really important for people.
And through your shot execution, like I tell everybody, I'm like, if you have any hand torque issues, solve that first, because that's going to have the biggest negativity on what kind of grouping you got downrange is hand torque.
And sort of shifting gears into a different topic, because I really want to cover this and also be mindful of your time. This is moving more towards your podcast and the information that people will find there. So what inspired you to start the Focus Hunting podcast and Focus Outdoors Canada? Like, tell us a bit about that.
Well, I started selling clothing just to help out the nonprofit organization. So what I remember, when my first son was born, we took him hunting, and he was 4 years old, and we were out grouse hunting, and he was running around. He grabbed the grouse, and he loved it, right? And I remember it was him, my dad, and myself, and I remember sitting there thinking, man, there's three generations of us here, three generations of the Toye family here, and we're out hunting. And the only way I want to be in the driver's seat, where my dad is when I'm his age and have my grandson there. And then you start seeing you start paying a little more attention what's going on in the province with, our wildlife and the way our government mishandles and mismanages our wildlife. So I started, just basically Wild Sheep Society, lifetime member, SCI member. And I just felt like it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. So, and I have a business here, and I've done pretty good for myself with my business. So I started a side business, and I made a bunch of clothing, and I basically was doing, I was giving proceeds to Wild Sheep Foundation. I built it, I designed a t-shirt, and all the proceeds, all the sales would go to the Wild Sheep Society, or I'd do a run of t-shirts, and it would help with the sheep draw. I did the same thing for Hunters for BC, blah, blah, blah. And then, I'm not really a salesman. I struggle with online stuff. I'm, by trade, I do work with my hands. I'm good at that. So I started it was actually my wife. She said, well, maybe you should start a podcast to promote the online stuff. And it kind of, it was really hard at the beginning to get guests, and it's changed, definitely changed a lot now since when I first started. I started in 2000. End of 2019 is when I started. So it's definitely changed a lot. It's a lot easier now. It's a lot more accessible to get guys, with Zoom. COVID was actually, for a guy in my situation, COVID actually helped me a lot, because everybody, it's hard to get the idea of people doing online interviews. It's hard to get them on board with that. But then COVID came around, and, then all of a sudden Zoom was like this big thing, and it became easy. And now, like, I'll do podcasts, and it's so much easier just to do them and over Zoom rather than do them in person, which is doing them in person is nice, but it takes a long time to set your gear up, and then you got to, there's a lot more involved for that. So and then it kind of just transitioned into I just love doing it, and I love talking about hunting, and and then I brought Pete on board, and he's been on board now for, we have quite a bit we got quite a bit of episodes that I got to edit. Behind in my editing, it's daunting process for me, but and we just talk hunting. We talk, my show is primarily bow hunting. We talk bow hunting every show. We talk a lot about fitness on there. We talk, we don't get into the sheep and the goat stuff. We're elk hunters, we're deer hunters, bear hunters, turkey hunters. So that's kind of our gig, and we kind of just stick to our niche, and we just talk about what we love to talk about, and we love what we're passionate about.
Yeah, you're just over 100 episodes released. I'm sure you probably have more waiting in the wings, but what's the vision and goal with it? Are you just going to keep doing episodes for as long as there's people to talk to, or are you striving for a particular goal?
No particular goal. And like I said, I never did it to monetize it or to make money, and sponsors and stuff. We're not interested in that. We just want to keep it pure. And like I said, we just love talking. We talk about this stuff all the time anyway. Like Pete and I, we talk every day, and it's funny. We're good friends. We know each other growing up, and so like it's almost harder now. We have to make a point of not talking to each other because we run out of things to talk about on the podcast, and we can't. It's not as it's not the same when you try to talk about it the second time, or you're trying to force a conversation that you just had a day before. You already know what the guy's answer is going to be. You know, it's just not the same. So, but yeah, we're just going to keep doing it. We love doing it. I mean, like I said, we're passionate about bow hunting. We love archery, and there's always stuff to learn. Like I'm constantly learning through the guests. I'm constantly learning stuff about archery every day. I learn stuff about hunting. Like I had Robbie Denning on. That show hasn't an episode yet. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Robbie Denning, but he's pretty much the best mule deer hunter in the world. So, you know, you learn lots from him and lots from guys like that. And man, you get to talk about people. You get to talk with people that are passionate about the same things you are. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you at several times you've kind of mentioned conservation and kind of how it kicked off, but what do you see as those big areas that we need to be focusing on, not for next year, but for 10 years or a generation away? What are the big things that we need?
Our provincial government, yeah, the way our provincial government handles our wildlife and manages our wildlife. I know we just had a big win with forestry, them changing the Forestry Act, which was huge for us, which is good.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of work put in by a lot of people for that. You know, I don't think you could pat one specific group or organization, or
no, that was a collective effort for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So but just the you know, funds, the money, you know, how much money is generated from sportsmen and women in this province, and how much money actually goes back into the management of our wildlife, you know, it's just not right. And like that, and that's, you look at how, you know, you look at the platforms they have down the States with like Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson, and how those funds run. Like they're federally matched. They have billions and billions of dollars to put into wildlife every year.
Yeah.
Right. And that you look at the space that they have and how much better managed their wildlife is. And like, we got 30, there's more people in California than there is in Canada, and our province is bigger than, our country is bigger than their country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there's definitely lots of room for improvement there.
Their priorities are definitely, but it's tough. That's a tough vote, right? And I get it. You're a politician. It comes down to votes, and you know, if you want a job, you got to be talking to the people that are making that have the biggest voice. So
yeah. If somebody was looking to get into that conservation aspect, or more into you know, the paper side of the hunting world, the policy and all that kind of stuff, is there a place that you would recommend that they start or volunteer or get involved with, just based on the experience that you've had so far?
Just join a group, you know, backcountry hunters and anglers, Hunters for BC, wild sheep. It doesn't matter what you're doing, get involved. I mean, you talk to any, like you guys, if there was a person that said, hey, I want to be more involved, I want to be more hands-on, if there wasn't a position available for them, you make one, right? I mean, you don't turn people away that want to be involved. They want to help out. I mean, it's it's all volunteer time, right? It's hard to find people to volunteer their time. And, you know, as things go on now, it just seems it's harder and harder to get people to volunteer their time. Yeah, I mean, just first of all, join a group and just help out. You know, there's lots of groups locally, close by. You know, whatever's closest to you, I think would be in your most benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Howl for Wildlife? Is that, I don't know a lot about it, but you have involvement with it, so maybe share what that is about.
Well, yeah. So that was created by Charles Whitwam. He's American, and he's from Arizona. Same with John Stallone. John's a friend of mine. So their platform is pretty unique. It's like nothing we have up here. It's like nothing that was ever created before. So they're a different type. They're a new breed of conservation organization. They're not basically helping one specific cause. They're just out there. Any initiative that's going to threaten sportsmen and women's right to hunt and fish, that's what their goals are. That's what their target is. So it's a little different. They're not actually putting boots on the ground. They're not actually, you know, they're not doing reintroductions of sheep. They're not doing the, you know, the classic conservation organization groups. So they're kind of coming at it a different way. Anything that's gonna threaten our right to go hunt and fish, they're on it. And the way Charles has it designed is basically you go onto their website, you become a member, and anyone listening, I strongly urge you to do. And I mean, we had some issues up here up here in Canada. We talked to Charles and maybe with the 7B stuff, and then recently with the gun control stuff. And the way Charles' platform is basically one person goes onto his website, they fill in their name, their email, and they hit send, and that one goes out to every single MLA that it's concerning to. So in British Columbia, I hit the button once, that one email went out to every single MLA in BC. Now, Charles spends his time and he writes out, he does 50 for every initiative, every take action on that webpage. Charles will write out 50 different generic email or non-generic emails. Sorry. So they're not just getting the same, and it doesn't show up when it shows up into their inbox. It shows up coming from your name and your email. It doesn't show up coming from Howl for Wildlife. So when they see it, it doesn't go into their spam mail. It looks like it's coming from Kevin Toye.
Yeah.
So you go on there, you do it once. Every MLA gets dinged with this email, right? So I remember talking to Mike Harris, and he was like, man, we got thousands and thousands of emails. We never even seen this before. And that was credited from the stuff that John and Charles did. And same, the same with the gun control stuff in Canada. I mean, it went on their platform, and then 3 days later, I mean, this might be a huge coincidence, but 3 days later, the Liberals, they withdraw their amendment for the bill. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other groups who are pushing for it too, but, you can't help say that didn't play a role in it all of a sudden. And the thing is too, is they have a much bigger reach down there. They got 16 million, there's 15 or 16 million hunters down there.
Yeah.
I mean, sportswomen. So that's what I was saying. It's important for us to support them, because when we need them, they have much more power than we do. So John Smith down in Arizona or down in Montana, he sees something in BC. He's like, you know what? I'm going to fill it out anyway. So he hits send, 50 emails go in. Now, if you take 10%, you take 10% of that 16 million hunters, right?
Yeah.
That's 1.6 million. That's more hunters than there are in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's why I always tell everybody, listen, we need to support those guys down there, because when the bully comes to our playground, we need our bigger brother there to help us out.
I mean, that's always kind of been the challenge within Canada, is it isn't as much of a lifestyle or a commonplace thing that, and that's why I think for me with entry point hunting, I didn't grow up with hunting. It wasn't something that I had access to. It wasn't something so you don't learn the conservation, you don't learn the history, the methods, and that was why we started this podcast. Was it's tough to learn, but like you were saying, it's hard to get people to volunteer. Making it easy for people to participate and to take action, I think is a key to actually seeing some impacts happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a huge one. I mean, we find here in Canada, we just seem to struggle with unity between hunters. We just if it doesn't immediately affect us, we just don't seem to care as much as we should. And
that's with anything though.
Yeah.
It's certainly true. On the wildlife aspect is everyone has their not everyone, but most people have some sort of focus. If you're part of the Wild Sheep Society, it's because you're a big sheep hunter, or you're part of this organization because you specifically like this. So, there's a focus happening on overall wildlife, but it's happening in this fragmented thing. Whereas I love the power of the Howl for Wildlife platform, saying we're not focusing on just this one particular species or this one particular issue. If you have a cause that you're passionate about, here's the platform to be able to distribute that and get some sort of action happening.
Yeah, and Charles is really good too. I mean, you reach out to Charles, send him an email, and he'll get back to you right away. And if it's worthwhile, obviously he can't put every little thing on there, but if it's worthwhile and if it's important and if it's going to impact hunters and if it's going to hurt outdoorsmen and women, then he's on it. That's his job. That's that's kind of the role he created for himself. And John Stallone was a big part of that. It wouldn't be where it is today without John. So and John, it was great that he got on there because he's got a name in the industry. He's got a lot of reach, and so no, it's really good what they're doing.
Awesome. anything that, like, what would be your 2 minute or less, or your brief start to any new hunters, whether bow hunting or rifle hunting, but somebody who's looking at getting into this? What are a couple of the big things that you would give to them?
Well, if you're a new bow hunter, the biggest thing to be about a bow hunting is you got to be willing to eat a tag. Just leave your rifle at home, and it just forces you to become a better bow hunter. And that's it. I mean, the first year I stuck to strictly a bow. I did, I punched a few tags, but it was a tough winter. My freezers were definitely empty. And I got 5 mouse to feed at home. So just stick with it. It's like anything worth doing is going to be hard to do. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're doing in life. If it's something you love to do and you want to do it, it's going to be, there's a reason for it. It's going to be challenging. So you just got to stick with it. You got to do it every day. You got to be passionate about it. You got to shoot your bow every day. You got to put yourself, you got to be in shape. You got to train. You don't have to train. You don't have to lift weights and run every day, but you got to be physically active. You got to be willing to put yourself in a situation where, because when you're bow hunting, you're not going to be able to drive around in your truck and all of a sudden jump out and shoot it with your bow. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's guys out there that do it, but they're better than I am. I can't do it that way. So
I'm sure we'll get some comment somewhere. Like, oh, I did that.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Yeah. But like I said, that, if you want to be consistent, successful, there is an equation to it, and it just comes with hard work. And like I said, you got to be not willing to fail. And that goes for any type of hunting. When you first start hunting, don't get discouraged about not shooting an animal, and don't turn down any animal just because you see some guy's picture on Instagram and he's got a 200-inch buck or a 150-inch whitetail. Comparison's the thief of joy. Don't ever worry about what he's doing. Worry about what you're doing. You see a spike buck, you got your bow in your hand, you put it down. I mean, it's meat in the freezer. Learn yourself, learn the process, you learn a lot about yourself too. You're not going to get over those shakes. You're not going to get over the intimidation of everything until you start going through it. And I know the best bow hunters in the world. I mean, for the first years of them bow hunting, they shot the first thing that walked in front of them. And I did the same. I mean, I look back at my first buck I shot, my first mule deer I shot with a bow. It was a little 4x2. I mean, it was nothing special, but I was more elated with that 4x2 mule deer than I was with my 200-inch I got with my rifle.
Yeah, it's something, right? It's your first anything of an animal that you get to harvest. So that's a hugely special moment.
And and you got to go through that. You got to go through the process, and and I know a lot of people who were passionate about hunting. They never shot anything. They wanted to get into hunting, and then they killed something and they didn't like it. So I mean, there's that aspect too, right?
Yeah, my cousin was like that. She thought she was going to get into hunting. Her partner's really big into hunting, and she shot her first animal, and she cried, and she said, "I can never do that again. I'm not a hunter. I am not somebody who can take life." And so that was a huge learning moment for her, that this thing that she had been training for and going and practicing and doing all this stuff, took her first animal and said, "No, that's it. I can't do it again."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you don't know until you do it. And like I said, and you're going to fail, and it's hard work, and just keep plugging away. But again, if it's worth doing it, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, definitely. Well, being mindful of time, we do have a little wrap up here, and Kevin, for you, this is going to be rapid fire questions that are quick, short answers. So, what was the first animal that you ever harvested, and how old were you?
Like first big game?
No, first animal ever.
Oh, I think I was 8 years old and I shot a grouse.
Nice. Yeah, I was 30 when I shot my first grouse.
Yeah.
Seems to be most people's like first animal, either a bunny or a grouse.
Yeah.
Favorite hunting resource, whether that be a podcast, obviously not your own, a podcast, a book, or a forum.
Oh, I would say
else like that.
I would say a book, Robbie Denning's book, or I would say How to Hunt Big Mule Deer by Robbie Denning.
Nice. Cool. What's your favorite hunting snack?
Trail mix with M&Ms.
Nice. Yeah. That's always a good one. Do you do double socks or one layer of socks?
I switched to liners this year, and I won't switch back. I used to just be a single sock type of guy, but I switched to liners this year, and I will not look back.
Okay. Do you have a lucky hunting item that you take with you?
No, but I am very particular. I pack my bag a certain way. I do everything a specific way. It's kind of a pattern. It's almost like an OCD deal. I have to do it the same way every time. I lay all my gear out if I'm going on a 5-day hunt, 10-day, I lay it all out. It all gets packed in my bag the same way. My bow goes on my bag the same way. It all gets prepped the same way.
Yeah, consistency, and then you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's my process too. It helps me make sure I didn't forget anything.
Yeah, true. Last one. What is the one absolute essential item that you have to have on every hunt? If you had like nothing else, you would absolutely have to have this one thing other than your bow.
In reach.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I will not leave. Even when I'm going out checking trail cameras, I take that thing with me.
Yeah, that's smart, especially when you have, 5 miles at home. So,
well, I've known guys who've been stuck out there overnight, 3 days. And I've been part of search parties going looking for guys. It's horrible. And just you're trusting a lot, like you're putting a lot of shoulders like on our loved ones back home, right? If all of a sudden you don't make it to the end of the trail, you don't make it home that night when you're supposed to be home, you're putting them through a lot of stuff that, they're not asking you to. This is something that I love to do. This is something I want to do. I shouldn't be asking them to go through that. So like an in-reach just solves all that problem.
Totally. We will put all of your contact information and stuff down below where people can find your podcast and get in touch if they have more questions. But did you have any last comments that you would want rookie bow hunters or just rookie hunters to know as they're getting into this thing that we love so much?
No, just get out there and get after it. You're not going to kill anything sitting on the couch. So just get out and enjoy the outdoors. That's the biggest thing. I mean, we do it because we love to be outside. We love to getting out, and we love animals. And that's what it all comes down to. Yeah,
totally. Well, thank you for being on today and for going on deep dives with us into some different topics. We're happy to chat with you anytime on that.
Great. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening wherever you are. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find us everywhere that podcasts and video podcasts are found.
And if you have any comments or reviews, please drop them down below. We will get back to you, or you can reach us at questions@entrypointhunting.com.
And if you happen to know somebody who you'd recommend we talk to, whether they're an expert, an amateur, or growing in the sport, be sure to tag them in the comments or shoot us a message with their info.
And until next time, stay hungry.